everyone for joining us, everyone who is on the presentation so far. This is the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley Remote Training Series, the fall series. We had a couple other training series in the summer. Hopefully people were around for that. I think it was very successful. We had a really good turnout. The presentations were very well received. This series, we're gonna have two sessions. We're gonna have one today, and we're gonna have one next Tuesday. And these sessions are brought to you by the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley Center for Sustainable Agriculture and Rural Advancement. My name is Colin Kane. I'm the director of the UTRGV Texas Rural Cooperative Center. Today's sessions, we're going to be presenting on two topics today. The first session is going to be on hay production, and that's going to be put forth by Ivan Guerra, who I was just talking to. Ivan is a program coordinator with UTRGV SARA. And then the second session is going to be growing seedlings for transplant, and that's going to be by Juan Regosa. Juan Regosa is the director of the UTRGV Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program. And these presentations are brought to you by that project, the BFRDP project, and the UTRGV Texas Rural Cooperative Center. For specific details on those programs, what our activities are, the types of projects and clients that we have, go on Facebook, look up UTRGV Beginning Farmer Rancher, and also look up UTRGV Texas Rural Cooperative Center. We have sort of updates on our programs, assistance that we provide. And as we go through these presentations today, we're going to do our best to be very responsive to the audience that we have with us here today. We are here to serve clients in South Texas and in the Valley in particular. If you have specific questions on these topics or others, make sure to reach out to Juan, make sure to reach out to Ivan. And for next week, make sure to reach out to crews with questions, send them emails, call them up. That's what we're here for. That's what our jobs are. Today, we're going to be presenting on topics. We do it generally. If you have specific questions about how those topics relate to your operation, that's what the follow-up's for. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our first presenter, who is Ivan Guerra. As I said, he's a program coordinator here with UTRGV SARA. He's worked with UTRGV, previously UT Pan Am, since 2012. He's got a degree in agricultural science, and he assists small-scale beginning farmers and ranchers through outreach, technical assistance, and hands-on trainings. He also owns and operates Guerra Ranch in Willacy County, which is a diversified operation specializing in forage production, sorghum, cotton, and watermelon. He's also a member of the local cooperative extension program in agriculture and natural resources. And he is an expert, he's a particular expert in growing hay and forage grasses for more than a decade here in South Texas. So I'm going to hand this over to Ivan for your presentation.
Thanks for joining us today. My name is Ivan Guerra. I currently work for UTRGV Center for Sustainable Agricultural and Rural Advancement, also known as SARA. And I'm also a local owner, operator of a small hay farm. I've been in the business for over 10 years. My grandfather started baling in the 60s here in the Valley. My presentation today will include information to help you better understand the hay baling process. Let's begin. What is hay? Hay is the process of cutting, drying grasses and legumes. It is used when there is a shortage or drought of forages. Hay provides feed for large grazing animals raised as livestock, such as cattle, horses, goats, and sheep. Some advantages of baling hay are it can be used in times of drought or winter. Once the hay is baled, it requires less space for storage than silage, and it can be a profitable business if managed properly. And we know here in the Valley, we typically have periods of drought. Typically, we always have a demand of hay year-round. Some of the disadvantages of baling hay are that it requires a lot of time and extra labor. During the hay making process, 10 to 15% of the nutrients are lost. So it usually is used as a filler. Weather conditions must be hot and dry to properly bale, but that's usually not an issue in the area we live in. As you can see in this slide here, it requires several individuals to stack the hay on a trailer. For that reason, a lot of times people are sort of discouraged of getting into the business, but typically the hay bales, when it comes to square bales, provides the most profit margin. Not all hay is the same. Some types of hay produced in the RGV include improved Bermuda grasses, Sudan cross sorghum varieties, and some alfalfa. Alfalfa will be the variety with the most nutrients, and it is used to feed horses and show cattle. As you can see here in the slide, we have the top picture. It's an improved hybrid Bermuda grass. The middle picture on the slide here is going to be your Sudan grass, and the picture on the far bottom is going to be your alfalfa. Each of these types of grasses have sub varieties. These are Tifton 85, NK37, Jigs Bermuda, and Coastal Bermuda. Producers of these varieties of hybrid grasses supply the local feed stores, equestrian operations, zoos, and private farm and ranch operations. Varieties of Sudan and hay grazer include red top cane, Sudan grass, sorghum, Sudan cross, and sweet sorghum crosses. This type of grass is usually grown for cattle producers, goat, and sheep operations. As you can see here, I'm baling some square bales for an operation that has goats. Typically, goats prefer the Sudan hay over Bermuda grasses. So I've got a market already set up for those particular bales. Just like other plants, these varieties are perennial or annual forages. Perennials are plants that last more than 2 years. Example would be Bermuda grass and alfalfa. Annuals are plants that complete the life cycle within one growing season. Examples would be hay grazer and Sudan crosses. This is something to consider if you're wanting to commit to a long-term crop. Site preparation is very important when establishing forages. Land that is planted in grass is recommended to be laser leveled prior to planting. This will help with irrigation and also will provide a better yield. This is a picture of machinery that is doing laser leveling. Keep in mind that laser leveling can be partially funded through the USDA with a qualifying grant. The land must be well managed and tilled in order to have a desirable yield. Typically, the land will be chiseled, plowed, and disked prior to planting. We have a tractor that is chiseling. We got another picture of a tractor that is plowing. Typically, prior to me planting my Sudan hay grazer, I'll run these two implements. Then I'll go back with a disc the field up, level it back up, and then I'll plant my hay grazer. The rate of seed may vary depending upon the conditions and equipment. Broadcasting and seed drill will usually allow 30 to 50 pounds per acre, whereas the single row planter will allow for 8 to 10 pounds per acre. And as I mentioned, it's all depending on your conditions. If you have plenty of moisture, you can typically, go the full 50 pounds if you're doing broadcasting or drilling it in. So keep that in mind that it all is going to revolve around moisture typically, and that would be one factor to decide how much to plant per acre. Here on this next slide, we see the types of planters that are used to plant hay grazer. On the first slide to your left, we have a drill planter, and as I mentioned, you can calibrate that drill to plant between 30 to 50 pounds per acre. The middle picture will show your conventional single row planter. In this particular planter, when I plant my hay grazer, I calibrate it to around 8 pounds per acre. And the picture to the far right, that is a broadcaster. And this implement, you can calibrate it all the way to 100 pounds per acre, but it's recommended 30 to 50 pounds as well. Typically, you want to plant about 5 to 10 bales of tops per acre. If you are sprigging, it is recommended 20 to 30 bushels per acre. When I say tops, typically that involves finding some good hybrid variety of grass that you want to plant in your field, and in that process requires for the individual to bale it for you green, and with those bales you'll go spread it in your field and disc it over, and that's the way that process is done. The sprigging requires and then the implement that's here on the slide, it's a little bit more complex because they're actually pulling out the roots, and you need really specific implements for that process. But you can do either the through tops or through sprigging, and they'll both have the same results. Tops are the stem or the runner that is above the root and is usually 6 weeks old, and it can be between 18 and 24 inches long. Sprigs are typically 3 to 5 inches long and contain numerous nodes and roots. On this top picture here, this is a particular field that I get my tops from. And here I just, it's freshly mowed grass. And what I'll do, I'll bale it green just the way you see it. And I'll take the green bales to the field, spread them out, and just disc it over. And as soon as I got the field disked, I'll apply the water. And typically in around 6 weeks, I'll start seeing the grass get established. And that's a process for when anyone refers to tops, that's what that entails. The bottom picture here, like I said, that is actually a sprig that was planted mechanically. And that requires, like I said, you to get your desired grass through an individual that has that equipment that pulls out the sprigs. So you can go both ways, but the most economical way would be by planting the tops, like I mentioned. Sprigging is about $125 to $200 per acre. Planting tops of Bermuda ranges between 70 to 100 per acre. Sudan hay grazer will typically range between 30 to 50 per acre. Sprigging is always going to be more expensive, like I said, because the individual that's going to do it has specialized equipment, and you would have to contract that person to come to your field and plant it. Planting tops, if you're in a budget like me, you typically get a hold of a producer that has a desired variety. You tell them that you would buy, the tops or green bales, and the price can range from $7 to $10 per bale. If you need 10 bales per acre, if you want to go at that rate, you're still under $100. If you're doing Sudan or hay grazer, that price will vary depending on the hybrid of the seed you use, and other factors. But those are just some examples of estimated costs. Weed control. Once you plant your sprigs or your tops or your hay grazer, there's ways to control weeds. If you're doing a single row operation where you're planting with a single row planter, of course you can use mechanical. You can go with a cultivator and maintain it. If you're doing tops or sprigs, your only option would be, of course, chemical or manual. If you have invasive grasses that start creeping in, you can go in there and control them manually. Or, like I mentioned, use a herbicide, a selective herbicide that will not damage your Bermuda, but will kill those other grasses. Just like any other crop, these forage grasses are susceptible to insects that cause damage and loss of production. Common issues are the armyworm in Bermuda grass, sugarcane aphid in Sudan grass, and the alfalfa has the blister beetle. Bermuda grass has issues with the armyworm. It'll wipe out your grass from one day to the next. And that's been an ongoing problem the last couple of years because we haven't had a really cold winter. The productivity of your operation also includes a choice of irrigation methods. The most common practice of irrigation in the RGV is flood irrigation because it's the most economical. The sprinkler and pivot system requires a substantial amount of investment to include it in your production costs. As we can see here in the slide, flood irrigating some Sudan grass that I planted with my drill. So you can see there we had a very dry spring this past year. So I'm irrigating my Sudan The middle slide there shows a pivot system, and that's becoming very popular with hay producers because you can irrigate and literally bale in 2 or 3 days because it doesn't flood the soil and the soil doesn't get saturated. It just applies the right amount of water to the grass. And the third picture on the very bottom, here I'm irrigating a field that I have of coastal. It was laser leveled, so I'm flood irrigating it. Here's a list of the equipment that is recommended when you get into the baling business. Purchasing new equipment required will come with a $150,000 price tag. If you're wanting to start with used equipment, you could find to spend about half the amount mentioned. In my experience, when I started baling, I started with all used equipment. Every year I would purchase something new once I started making a profit, and that's how I was able to manage my cost of the operation. On this slide here, we have a mower conditioner. This implement is the first to be in the field when starting the harvest process. It is designed to cut, crimp, and crush newly cut hay to promote faster and even drying. And here, as you can see, I'm cutting some Sudan grass. Without this particular machine that crimps, it would take me probably 10 to 15 days to dry. But because it's got the crimpers, it crushes the hay and I'm able to bale it in 3 to 5 days. Here on this next slide, we have a rake. It is used to collect hay into windrows for the baling process. It's a very handy tool because sometimes if you don't have a lot of yield, you can cut down your time of baling and going in circles with your baler by combining several windrows to make one. It's very beneficial to have a rake in your operation. The tedder is an implement that has forks that ruffles and aerates the hay, which speeds up the drying process. And typically the tedder, you're going to use it in the fall when the days are shorter and the days also are cooler. So that's an implement that's really good to have, and it'll improve the drying process. On this slide, we have a square baler. It's an implement that compresses a cut and rake crop into small square bales that are easy to handle, transport, and store. A desired weight for a square bale is between 50 to 60 pounds. A round baler is an implement that picks up hay from the ground and feeds it into the bale chamber where it is wrapped by hydraulic pressure from the belts, then released. Sizes of round bales vary from a 4x4 to a 6x6 and have a weight range of 400 pounds to 2,000 pounds. Hay baling in the RGV has become a common agricultural business. With the demand for high quality forages, the market will continue to be strong.
All right. Thank you, Yvonne. That was fantastic. In particular, those drone shots were really something of the hay rake. In particular, those were shots of Yvonne's operation himself. I think that was really neat. So that's Rio Grande Valley hay production in action. Okay, so just a reminder for those who showed up a little bit after we got going with the presentation in terms of housekeeping. So we're doing two presentations today. That was the first one that was on hay production. That was Yvonne Guerra. The second one that we're transitioning over to right now is on producing transplants, seedling transplants for production. It could be for backyard production or for commercial production. And Juan Regosa is going to be presenting on that right now. Juan directs the UTRGV Beginning Farm and Rancher Development Program, where he helps small-scale farmers with organic production methods, soil improvement, irrigation technologies, organic pest control, among a whole other slew of topics. He owns and runs Terra Preta Farm, which he's done with his wife since 2011. TPF is an organic certified farm growing a diversified vegetables, and it also serves a CSA program, farmers markets, restaurants, and wholesale clients as well. Previous to his experience with UTRGV and UT Pan American, he worked as a head grower assistant at a commercial bedding plant producer in Utah, as a field supervisor at Pioneer Hybrid in Weslaco, and as a research assistant at Texas A&M Kingsville Citrus Center in Weslaco. And Juan also has a bachelor's degree in agricultural engineering and a master of science in plant and soil science. So he is a very experienced and very, very well-known, very recognized member of the sort of the sustainable farming movement here in South Texas and in the Rio Grande Valley. And for the, those who know. So I would like to hand this over to Juan, and Juan, please take it over.
Yes, thank you, Colin. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. We know that all of you are very busy, so we have pre-recorded these presentations to make them flow better and faster. But at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session and also open for comments. So I'm going to click play on my presentation, and please stick around at the end for comments and questions. So here we go. Good morning. Today's presentation is about transplant production. Growing transplants or seedlings requires a lot of attention and observation, since we're dealing with baby plants and all the roots are contained in a small cell. This might sound a bit challenging, but the good thing is that by learning some key information on this presentation, you will be on the right track to grow your own seedlings successfully. You might be asking yourself, why to grow seedlings? We grow seedlings because there is better seed germination. When you provide the right conditions to a planted seed, the chances of germination are highly increased. Maximizing germination rates is important when seeds are expensive and time is short. Another benefit is that you have a smaller growing area to manage where you can provide the right growing conditions. For example, some seedling trays can hold 300 baby plants in 3 square feet compared to 300 square feet in the field. A big plus when growing your own seedlings is weed control. How? When we plant a seed in the ground and we water it, we're also watering all the weed seeds, and sometimes these outgrow our crops and you have to spend more time and labor weeding your crops. When you grow your seedlings indoors or in a greenhouse, this allows you to cultivate your soil in advance to get rid of all the weeds on the field and transplant on a weed-free bed, placing your seedlings ahead of the weeds. Another advantage of transplant production is that you can have an early harvest. Starting plants indoors or in covered structures protects them from unfavorable weather conditions. For example, here in the valley, you can start your seedlings in January, and come February, you will have a 6-week-old seedling ready to plant that you'll harvest in March. Whereas, if you wait to seed until the risk of freeze has passed, you will start harvesting later in the season. This also applies during the hot summer months. You can provide some shade and cooling to your seedlings and then transplant when it's not so hot and be ahead a month or two. Another reason why it's good to grow your own seedlings is that you can grow what you like or what you want. Sometimes we try to buy seedlings at the store of what we want, but it's not available. Or what's available isn't in season for our area. So growing your own seedlings gives you the freedom to grow the varieties you want in the right season. Some common crops grown as transplants are tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, celery, onion, lettuce, broccoli, kale, watermelon, parsley. Also, any very small or expensive seeds should be grown as a seedling to provide the right growing conditions and have better germination. There are 6 very important things to consider when we are growing seedlings: the growing mix, planting depth, the moisture, temperature, light, and fertilization. Let's start talking about the growing mix. The growing mix is very important because it is what we will be surrounding the seeds. Your mix needs to have the right texture and provide the best conditions to allow for a maximum germination. There are many different combinations of materials that can be used to make soil mixes. Today, I will talk about the materials we use at our farm, and info will be oriented to small farms that are planning to grow a considerably number of seedlings, but info can also be applied to a smaller project or garden with some minor modifications. The first ingredient that we use in our growing mix is compost. We can see that there are some organic materials that didn't fully decompose, such as small pieces of wood, and that's why we sift our compost to only use fine materials in our mix. We can see how compost looks after being sifted. It is a smaller particle that is easier to handle and provide good contact with the seeds. The second material we use is vermiculite. Vermiculite increases soil aeration while retaining moisture and nutrients for faster and maximum growth. We also use peat moss. Peat moss is a natural organic growing media material that regulates moisture and air around plants' roots for ideal growing conditions. Another material very common in growing medias is perlite. Perlite is a volcanic mineral that is processed at very high temperatures to provide aeration and good drainage. A simple soil mix recipe that you can use is 1 part of brown peat moss, 1 part of perlite, 1 part vermiculite, and 1 part of sifted compost. It is very important that you moisten all materials before you start mixing them. You don't want your mix to be all dusty and dry, and it is always recommended to use a dust mask when working with these materials. All these bulk materials can be purchased at Kinney Bonded in Donna, Texas. Now for smaller projects, you can purchase a bag of potting mix or seed starting mix at Home Depot, Lowe's, Tractor Supply, and other local stores. Some items that we find very useful when mixing the materials is this feed scoop that you can find at local feed stores or pet stores. Also very helpful is using a concrete mixing tub that you can find at home improvement stores. You can see in this picture a soil mix batch that has been thoroughly mixed by hand inside the tub. Let's talk now about growing trays. Trays come in many different sizes and materials such as plastic, hard plastic, styrofoam, cardboard, etc. There are trays with only 32 cells to some with 342 cells or more. Most of them are reusable. We usually rinse them with a spray gun every season to start with a clean tray. We use this plastic tray with 128 cells for the fall and winter for most of our crops, and the 242 cells styrofoam tray during the hot weather because of the white color to reduce heat and since they provide better insulation. Once we have all the materials mixed, we start filling up the trays by placing them on top of the mix in the mixing tub. We start spreading and pressing soil mix into all the cells. Once they are all full, we tap the tray on a flat, hard surface to see which cells need more soil mix and we add it. When all the cells in the tray have been filled and packed, we make dibbles in each cell using the index and middle finger and pushing down to the depth needed. A general planting depth recommendation is 2 to 4 times the size of the seed. There are some commercial dibbling plates available that work for different depths that really speed up the process and are more precise. The plates are usually pricey, but if you are planning to grow many trays, this could be a good investment. Now, if you have some carpentry and building skills, you can build your own for a fraction of the cost of the commercial options. This website offers many dibbling plates options. They also offer this vacuum seeder that can really speed up your planting. A small vacuum is connected to a plate that has the same amount of holes and spacing of your trays. While the vacuum is on, you place the seeds on the plate and start moving them around until all the holes have a seed in them. Then you remove the excess seeds. You flip the plate and place it on top of the tray and turn off the vacuum. This will drop a seed in each cell of the tray simultaneously. You can plant a whole tray in a few minutes with this vacuum seeder. Of course, you can always seed by hand, and we still do some hand seeding for the crops that we only need a few trays and we don't have a plate for the seeder. For watering, we use a professional water breaker from dram irrigation. We use this to prepare our soil mixes and to water well-established plants. For newly planted trays and young and tender plants, we use a water fogger attachment that creates a very fine mist. We also use a watering wand to reach the back of our growing tables and water more efficiently. Once your trays are seeded, you will cover them with soil mix and press it to make good seed contact. Then you can proceed to water very well with a fogger or mister to not disturb the soil mix and potentially wash away the seeds from the cells with a big splash of water. A way to tell if your tray is well watered is by lifting it after you water, making sure that it's heavier. After a week or so, depending on the crop, your seeds will germinate and you will continue watering to keep soil moist at all times. Make sure you water more often on windy and hot days. With time, you will notice that other leaves with a different shape will start developing. Those are called the true leaves where photosynthesis will happen, and your young seedlings will need more nutrients then. Now, on the soil mix, we included compost, which will provide a small amount of nutrients to the plant. However, when the plants have a couple sets of true leaves, you may need to start fertilizing and provide plenty of light. Let's talk about fertilization. Before you apply any liquid fertilizer, it is recommended to water your seedlings before you actually fertilize. An organic fertilizer you can use is fish emulsion. It is diluted with water according to label instructions and applied to your seedlings as a drench with a watering can. A crucial requirement to grow good quality seedlings is a good amount of light. We grow our seedlings in a small greenhouse with plastic film, making sure that it receives at least 10 hours of sunlight. On this slide, we can see what happens when seedlings don't get enough light. The plants start stretching very fast, trying to get closer to the light, and this makes the stems long and weak and very easy to break and prone to disease. If growing indoors, make sure you use growing lights like the ones shown here, or if you're using regular light bulbs, place your lights very close right above your seedlings, making sure you don't burn the leaves. Also, when growing seedlings indoors, it's important to mimic outdoor weather, and you can do that by placing an oscillating fan where the air movement strengthens the stems. The final goal is to have a compact seedling with a nice green color, strong stem, and plenty of true leaves and roots, like this tomato plant, to have strong and healthy plants ready for the field. Everything in this life has challenges, and now we will cover some pests and diseases that affect seedlings. It is recommended to check your plants daily on top and under the leaves and look for any pest damage or color changes to address the problem quickly and prevent further damage. Some of the most common pests are the cabbage looper, the foam army worm, aphids, and whiteflies. To control this pest, you can use the following products. For caterpillars or worms, you can use Bacillus thuringiensis, or also known as BT, and insecticidal soap for aphids, whiteflies, beetles, or mealybugs. The majority of diseases affecting seedlings are fungal diseases, and the most common one is damping off. This disease is caused by excessive moisture and cool temperatures that trigger fungal spores that will cause rotting of the roots and stem at the base of the young seedlings. Damping off rarely affect older plants. Some control options are: as a preventive treatment, you can spray your seedlings on a weekly basis with seaweed at the recommended rate to strengthen your plants. As control, reduce watering right away and spray your seedling with a tablespoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide diluted in 32 ounces of water in a spray bottle. Another option is spraying with 4 tablespoons of strong brewed chamomile tea diluted in 32 ounces of water in a spray bottle. Or spray neem oil at the bottle recommended rate. Thank you, and I hope this information sets you on the right track for successfully growing your own seedlings. Please contact me with any questions.
So we're going to go to some of the questions for now. So our first question we have is, are there any, so this is for Yvonne. Yvonne, are you there?
Yes, Colin, can you hear me?
Yes. Are there any particular hay varieties better for different parts of the valley? For example, Sudan in Raymondville, or something else in possibly in Starr County?
Well, it's going to range and that's going to be based on how much irrigation is available. If you're in Starr County, you may go with a buffalo grass that's native to that area and that's drought tolerant. If you're going to be in Hidalgo or Willacy or Cameron, where there's irrigation available, that's where you can go in with one of these hybrids of Bermuda, like we mentioned, either the Tifton, the Jigs, or the NK37. You know, that's my opinion on that. If you don't have irrigation, in the long run, it may not be effective to dump so much money in sprigging or put in tops in that property.
Okay, we have a question from Kimberly Speed, and Kimberly is in Bear County. And Kimberly asks, and this is for you, Yvonne, as well. This is on hay production. The question is, how do you manage moles? And she says gogers. I think she means gophers. Gophers. How do you manage moles and gophers? We have Bermuda grass and are new to hay production. That they do have someone who will be cutting and baling hay, but that they have an issue with moles and gophers. Is that an issue that you're familiar with?
Well, fortunately here, the only issue that I have is rattlesnakes. This past year, I killed like 6 rattlesnakes while I was irrigating my Bermuda grass. But as far as for moles, that's something that I'm not too familiar with. But I do know they do have some kind of a machine that is like a knife, and you run it back and forth your grass, and it doesn't disturb the grass very much, but it's put some kind of poison in the ground for those pests, those molds, because they do a lot of holes, a lot of damage throughout the properties. But fortunately, like I said, I don't have too much insight because we don't have that problem here in the valley.
And Kimberly, we can look into that and get back to you. If you can email either Yvonne or Juan after this, we can try to find out some information and get it to you. Yvonne's email is a.guerra@utrgv.edu. And then so for gophers, it's not that you can just put on some steel-toed boots and get out into the field and stomp around real loud and the gophers will take off. It's not that easy.
No.
Okay, it's a little bit harder than that. Great. Also for you, Yvonne, we have a question from Thomas Padilla. He's asking, which are the best grasses for more clay soils? which is, I think our clay soils are found further towards, I know Harlingen has a lot of clay.
Yeah, well, it can be, these varieties that we have of improved grasses are the Tifton. The most popular ones here in the area are the Tifton and the Jigs, and of course the Giant Bermuda, which is NK37. And I have some property that is has a lot of clay, and I couldn't really plant row crops on there because it's not a well drained soil. The water just stays stagnant.
Right,
So I started planting Jigs Bermuda on those particular areas, and it does very well. One, because those places are ideal for grass because the water just stays there, and the
right,
grass seems to absorb the moisture. And that would be my recommendation. Even if he's got some saline issues,
right.
a little bit salty, the Jigs does very well.
The jigs Bermuda.
The Jigs Bermuda does very
Okay,
well, and
that's
the
excellent. Juan, for you, for the transplant, for the seeds, where are you getting your seeds from here in the Valley? You're mute, Juan, somehow. Somehow the microphone jumped. So we'll go back to Yvonne. Yvonne, for you, how long, in your experience, what is the growing period for it to actually mature to be harvestable for the Sudan and the coastal Bermudas?
Okay, the Sudan, it's a 30 to 45 day crop, and ideally you want to bait it before it shoots the seed head, so that the plant material will have the most nutrients, meaning the leaves. It'll have the most protein, and that all revolves around weather again. Sometimes you can't avoid the rain and the bad weather, so it'll go into seeding. But ideally, it's a 30 to 45 day crop.
Mm-hmm.
And your coastal Bermudas, your improved hybrid grasses of coastals, the cycle for baling is again 30 days. Some people do 28. That's when the grass is very fine, it's very leafy. And if you're marketing to individuals that have horses, again, they want the grass to have the most nutrients available. And at that stage in that plant, between 28 to 30 days is when it's the strongest. After that, it gets stimmy, it gets more coarse and harder for the animals to digest, meaning the horses. If it's cattle, it doesn't matter if you go a little bit over the 30 days. But that's the ideal timelines on both of those forages.
Okay, and Yvonne, again for you on the hay production, we have a question from Ronnie Zamora. Shout out to Ronnie Zamora. How big of a problem are army worms for Bermuda and Sudan?
Well, it's a big problem. I sort of stopped growing the Sudan in the fall because I would plant it, tail end of August, and I would have it already nice, about a foot tall, and come around second week of September. From one day to the next, I would get wiped out by the armyworm. And the bad thing is that there's no indication that they're coming. You can't spray anything or do any preventive measures. From one day to the next, they're there and they'll chew off and just leave the little stem maybe 2 inches off the ground. And that's a hard one to manage. And of course the Bermuda grass too. If you have a coastal Bermuda, and you get infested with the armyworm, yes, you can spray, but again, that's gonna affect your profit margin. It's very expensive, that particular pesticide. And of course, you got to have the equipment too. You got to invest if you don't have the spray rig. So it gets a little bit more costly.
Right.
But there is ways to, with your Bermuda, you can possibly save it if you catch it on time. But your Sudan, like I said, it'll chew off all your leaves, and by the time that it rebounds, you're already creeping into October, and it's not a desired time to be baling. It's too cool already.
So is the army worm going to be an issue all year round, or is it seasonal?
Well, here in the valley, it's seasonal. It's usually in the fall, September, time
Okay.
frame that
Okay.
it comes in, and it just revolves around the weather. I've seen that if we have a very dry summer and we're coming in the fall, dry, it just we get infested, infested. And but of course, if we have a like we did this past summer, a real green summer, all the way up country, there was some, but there was so much foliage that it didn't affect us,
Right.
so much.
Right.
They kept busy chewing in other areas, and they didn't make it this far down.
Right. Okay. Juan, can we test your mic again? It's the same issue. I can't hear. Cruz, can you hear?
No, I can't hear, but I can answer his question.
Okay.
Locally, there's a individual, Champion Seeds,
Yep.
typically online. One of the most popular is Johnny's Seeds. Of course, there's your big companies, like Harris Seed Company and sort. You can look all those up online, and they have seed availability as far as small acreage is concerned, or larger acreage seed quantities.
Um, at what point in your experience, Cruz, at what point does it make sense, do you think, economically, to go from growing your own transplants to possibly shifting over to like buying them wholesale from a provider? And like, how do you go about making those kinds of decisions?
Well, economics is one, and I guess a timely issue is another. Sometimes you just don't have enough time for one or the other, either a seed or to transplant. Both of them are time consuming. If you get behind and you're growing your seeds, of course, transplants, whatever cost, may be the issue, would come into play. As far as size wise, anytime you farm anything above probably an acre or even half an acre, if you're growing a particular vegetable, it would be very nice, to go with transplants.
Right. I was looking at those plates that Juan was showing in his presentation. Are you yourself, Cruz, on your farm, are you using those plates at all for transplants?
We use local individual companies, nurseries that for transplants. At this point in time, for me, I don't necessarily like to do transplants. It's kind of tedious and so forth, so on. So I just have a local grower growing for me, and I just purchase them. Cost becomes an issue, like I said, when you're doing small acreage, because you're buying a flat, which is anywhere from 70 to 240 plants. And if you're small acreage, of course, you're going to be using only partial plants, and you're actually throwing money away. So,
Right. That makes sense. Back to you, Ivan. Ivan, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. We've got a question. If you cut your hay, right, and let's say you bale it, but it's out in the field curing, and it rains, is it automatically lost? Is it a lost cause, or is there a way to recoup it?
Well, in those situations, what I'll do, I'll just rake it. On the video, there was a shot of a tractor with a rake,
Right.
and I have a small rake that basically what it does, it'll turn that windrow over.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as complex as the one on the video, but it's just a single one where it just flips it over. And if we get a rain, of course, I'll leave it a day or two, let the top dry that got rained on, and I'll flip it over another day or two, and I'll bale it up. And that hay, what I do, I'll set it aside and I'll market it specifically for individuals that have cattle, and I
Right.
won't sell it to people that have horses, but it'll be just used as a filler. And a lot of the customers that I have, they have equipment where they have what they call a mixer, hay in there, and then they'll put other ingredients like grain, conceed hulls, conceed meal, and they'll do their own ration, and that hay will be specifically for those individuals.
So once it gets wet, it's only appropriate for certain uses.
Well, in my opinion, I to keep individuals, the customers happy, I'll declare to them that it was baled wet,
Right.
and of course it'll have a lower price as well, but it'll be specifically for your large animal such as cattle,
Right.
your large animals, and that's because of the horse individuals are very particular. At least the individuals that I sell the hay to,
Right.
they have a $10,000 horse. They're not gonna want a nickel and dime on hay.
Right.
So
when you say horse individuals, I'm imagining half human, half horses.
Oh, okay, no individuals.
We're talking about horse owners. Owners of horses.
No, these people almost live with their horses.
Of course, yeah. No,
that's their prized possession. So I understand, and I don't.
Group of people. Okay, Juan, gonna test your mic again.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay, back on. So we were back on the seed question. I know that Cruz answered a lot of your questions pretty well. But on the seed question, and then also on transplant storage, how are you storing these transplants over time? You have a protected sort of like a greenhouse, right?
Yeah, we have a small greenhouse, just covered with plastic, and then we also have a shade cloth we use during the summer.
Okay.
So that protects them from the wind. If it's too sunny, too hot, then we put the shade cloth. If it's cold, we close the greenhouse with the plastic.
Right. We also had a question on doing manual transplants versus like putting the transplants into the ground versus using a mechanized transplanter. Like at what point would you think does it make sense possibly to invest in a device to actually help you like mechanically get the transplants into the ground?
I think 3 or plus acres would be probably a good investment to buy a mechanical transplanter if you're gonna do 3 or plus, and you're gonna be doing it every year. Those mechanical transplanters, they are not that expensive. They're around 4,000. But if you think about it, how much you're gonna spend on labor for transplanting 4 acres, then it's a good investment after 3 or 4 acres, I would say.
We've got another question here from the audience from Juan Rivera. Juan, I apologize, it's taken a couple minutes to get to your question, but again, this is for Yvonne on hay production. This is a very specific Valley question here. Where can Juan find a farmer that does sprigs, that's selling sprigs in Cameron? And Juan's talking about some acreage he wants to grow on out in Los Fresnos that has irrigation. Yvonne, in general, I mean, we can't necessarily recommend specific vendors. We can just say, hey, these are the available vendors around. But in Cameron County, or even maybe in Willacy, if someone's close by in Cameron, how are you going about finding someone who's selling sprigs?
Well, the easiest way is to go to the local USDA office, and specifically the NRCS, and they usually have a list of vendors that they provide producers, and on that list they'll have individuals that sprig, individuals that laser level, individuals that do pipelines, but he's got to make sure that he makes contact with them, and they can email it to him. He can just call in to that office, and that's the vendor list for those projects that get funded through EQIP for the grants. Right. So that would be the easiest for him. And there is several that I know of in Cameron that I've referred other people to.
And for those who don't know, EQIP is a program through USDA NRCS that helps people with sort of equipment purchases that are related to conservation and whatnot, resource conservation. So thanks for your question, Juan. Appreciate that a lot. Juan Regosa, you back on? We've got a question for you. So you were mentioning some of this before, Juan. I think you're muted. That in terms of there are a couple of facilities in the Rio Grande Valley where, like, if you're growing for scale, if you're doing 4 or more acres or 10 acres, and you're doing your own transplants, at some point the sort of economic shift from it makes sense to do your own transplants to all of a sudden it makes sense to engage some of those companies and at least sort of explore those options. What are those companies, and then generally what are the thresholds that you are sort of going by in terms of when it makes sense maybe to shift to wholesale transplants?
Yeah, the two companies are Tropical Star in Alamo and also Spilling, also in Alamo. One is on the north side of the expressway, Tropical Star. The other one is on the south side. And, when we're going to do a decent amount of seedlings, which is above 5,000 seedlings, we decide to contract with them and take our seeds, certified organic seeds, and they will grow the seedling for you.
Okay.
Anything below 5,000, the price is still okay if you do it with them, but it's not that affordable. So the price changes considerably after 5,000 seedlings. So if you're gonna do 3 acres or 4, I would definitely recommend to go with them instead of you trying to grow them.
Okay.
As Cruz said, you require a lot of patience and detail, observation, attention. It's kind of tedious to grow seedlings.
Right.
So there is those two options to consider locally.
Okay. Thank you, Juan. So it's 11:02 now. If people, again, if you have any questions, now is the time to either put them into your Q&A function, or if for the attendees that are still around, if you would like to get on the mic and actually ask a question of Juan, Cruz, or Ivan, there should be a button that says raise your hand next to your name. If you click on the little participant button, I think that's where it would live. So we'll give people a couple of minutes to sort of explore that if that's something that you want to do. Otherwise, please remember to fill out the poll. I think it seems like everyone has done that so far. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll right now and wrap it up. So remember, everyone, in terms of you still have a few minutes here for the Q&A, but if you have questions that come up in an hour, a day, or a week, make sure to email Ivan on hay. Make sure to email Juan on seedlings and on transplants. Juan, your email is just your name, juan.regosa@utrgv.edu, right?
Yes.
Yes, and it's all online. Look up UTRGV, Center for Sustainable Agriculture, Rural Advancement, aka UTRGV SARA. You can also go on our Facebook pages for Beginning Farmer and Rancher program, or Texas Rural Cooperative Center. Both are technical assistance projects and training projects that we home at UTRGV SARA. And remember to sign up. Everyone should, if you can, stick around for next week. Not stick around, but show up again in a week. You don't have to stay on this Zoom link for an entire week. Just go back to this link in a week. On Tuesday, our own Cruz Salinas, who is on the Q&A right now, will be presenting. Cruz, do you want to give a little explanation of what the presentation is going to be about next week?
Sure. Basically, it's called a low tunnel. It's a high tunnel wannabe, and it's designed for not necessarily just for the backyard gardener, but it's an option to where if you're having a lot of problems with pests, with diseases and the sort, you have this option where you can protect your plants a little bit better and have a little bit more control on your plant growth.
All right, yeah, that's going to be really exciting, and it's cool because it's regional specific, and it's an invention basically of Cruz, and something he's sort of figured out himself. And this is the only place that you can get this kind of stuff. So I'm not seeing any raised hands. I think we've pretty much gone through all the questions. Otherwise, just remember next week, come back for Cruz's event. And in the meantime, if you have missed any of our previous trainings and you want to go back and look at them, we have a bunch on specialty crops, on tomatoes, on watermelon, on dragon fruit. Cruz did a really cool one on producing trellises to grow dragon fruit. Juan did a very sort of detailed but really clear one on planning for production for a growing season that was easy to scale for someone that would be on less than an acre to a few acres to 10 acres, a scalable approach for that work. So everyone go to our UTRGV SARA YouTube page. As the kids say, like and subscribe. check out the videos that are on there, and this presentation will be uploaded within the week, and our future ones will be on there. So I'd like to thank everyone for showing up for this, all the attendees, and all of our presenters. Ivan Guerra, Juan, and Cruz, thanks for showing up, and for everyone who's behind the scenes, thanks for showing up. Everyone stay safe out there. The coronavirus levels have been a little bit lower in the Valley than they are in the rest of the country, but man, it's happening, and it's a matter of when. So everyone stay safe, and hug your families and your loved ones, and we'll see you guys back in a week. Thanks for showing up. Appreciate it.